Hello, friends, and thank you for joining us on Charting the Way Forward, where we deliver research-informed strategy and intelligence from across the Democratic coalition. This podcast is produced by Way to Win. I'm your host, Kerry Eleveld, and today I am joined by...
I'm Dan Ancona, media and research consultant who works with Way to Win.
All right, and today we are super excited to welcome a guest who is lighting up the data world right now with compelling and incisive analysis that often flies in the face of DC orthodoxy. G. Elliott Morris, data journalist and founder of the must-read Substack Strength in Numbers. He formerly held high-profile posts at ABC News, overseeing 538, and The Economist, leading quantitative coverage. And in 2025, he founded the data firm Morris Predictive Insights. So welcome, Elliott.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to nerd out with you. I've been, I think, paying attention to stuff y'all have been putting out for a while. So this is there's a mutual question asking opportunity for both of us, perhaps. Let's see.
Right on.
All right. We love that. Well, Dan might be your better target there, but I will do my best. I'm like a faux data nerd. Like, I'm just not mathematical enough to be a true data nerd, but I do like to get into some numbers. So anyway, so here's the deal. We have been watching the stuff you've been pumping out for the last year, and we'd be like, Dan would be like, "Oh, look at this one," and I'd be like, "Oh, look at that one." And it just seems I had to ask, because you have been at this for a while. You know, it's not like, oh, well, you were, you came on the scene a couple years ago. You've been at it for a long time, but it does seem like in the past year, it just feels to me like you've kind of gotten to this place where you're really defining your niche and your voice. And does that feel true to you? Or do you feel like, nah, I've been doing this all along and people are just kind of catching on to me?
Oh, a nice personal question to start. No, I think my job changed, right? I mean, I previously was coming at all of these questions from purely a journalistic storytelling point of view, not The Economist is a editorial opinionated publication, so you can have opinions there, but not necessarily about like what's the best way for the Democratic Party to save democracy, for example, as a totally hyperbolic, made up question.
Completely random.
And I think we're in a different position now, where people who are pro-democracy, which is, I started out as a political science geek and polling nerd and very sort of pro-democracy before anything else. The people who are pro-democracy, I think, are kind of owe it to themselves to explore how they can use their skill set for that cause. And in my case, most of the writing I do at this point is, well, that's certainly the writing that you're referring to. Yeah. I think we can lump into, like, how can we help Democrats win the next election because they're the pro-democracy party?
Yeah.
And that's just not the type of work you do for ABC News. So that is, I think,
especially now,
that is, I think, the explanation that you're after. But there's also the second part of the explanation is that media environment has really changed. Even to the extent that I've always cared about this stuff and have done adjacent work. I used to write about malapportionment, for example, in legislatures, the Senate giving a really undue advantage to Republicans in the modern day, for being the big example here for The Economist. And the implications of that are very obvious in pro-democracy, but you're not really allowed to write that in a mainstream news publication. But now we're in an environment where journalists can be independently funded by their readers, like I do via Substack, and that is much more sustainable for people with a voice and with opinions. So I think there's two parts of the answer.
All right. Well, I love that. Super. I had noticed, and I thought, well, we have him on, we may as well ask the question. And but now we're going to get into there were frankly, so many pieces that we wanted to touch on of yours, we could not work them in. And realizing that the vast majority of our people are, listeners and not watchers on YouTube. We do have a YouTube component if anybody wants to watch, but we thought we'd be better off going deep on a few pieces rather than cutting across a whole bunch of them, because it can be hard for people to sort of like follow the numbers unless you talk more conceptually about them. So I'm going to lead sort of an A block, then Dan's going to hit a B block on something that he was really interested in, and then we'll do a little bit of Texas, because why not? And it turns out you're from Texas, which we didn't know.
That is true. Yeah, I'm a lone star. I don't know.
All right.
A Texan.
All right. There you go.
Can I just add really quickly that I need a little trophy here. I'm already suppressing the like million questions that I had about the media environment in the background. So like there's like that's that first setup, like we could have gone deep just on that. But like I'm glad we're staying focused here. I'm staying focused.
All right. Mini trophy for Dan. Okay. So the first topic we're going to hit was a piece that you wrote about Democrats' real problem now, not being that they are too liberal, but instead being that they are too weak. And I am continually amazed with the Beltway's obsession with ideology and the assumption that democratic moderation is the key to reaching 50+1 or winning elections, even if you don't get majorities. And you recently wrote about this misapplication of ideology to voters, calling Democrats out of touch, right? And what that really means when they say they think Democrats are out of touch. So why don't you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, look, not to rehash the debate too much, but in the traditional view, the way you win an election is to represent the views or the desires of the median voter, the person in the very middle who just decides the election. And you can put the person in the median based on their ideology or how they feel about politics from an anti-system point of view, or however you want to decide it. In that model, the advice to the Democrats is to occupy the position of the median voter, and the argument is that they have not been doing that, and that's why they lost the 2024 election. You all have done, of course, great work that suggests that that is not true, and they've lost the election for other reasons as well. Actually, my piece sets this part of the debate aside somewhat entirely because because public opinion has changed since 2024. So I think the biggest contribution that this piece made that frankly got overlooked is that the average American views the Republican Party as more extreme than the Democratic Party, or more Americans they say the Republican Party can be described as extreme than say that about the Democrats. So even if you buy median voter theorem, and let's just give our critics that right now, it doesn't apply right now because voters are aligning themselves closer to the Democratic Party at this point than they did previously. So if the party still has some electoral problems, and it looks like they might in 2028, 2026 is probably fine because of referendums, but 2028, like the party still has a negative favorability rating, for example. And in my survey data, voters say the party is weak. They don't know what the Democratic Party stands for, who it stands for. Then there are other things that you have to solve because the party has already solved the moderation thing, according to the survey data. So the way you might triangulate that is to look at where the other gaps exist in perceptions of the party. And the big one that comes out is that about 70% of the public says the Democratic Party cannot be described as tough. They describe it as weaker than they describe the Republican Party. So from a first principles point of view, that's a huge thing that very few people, and y'all are like nodding along, are really talking about inside the DC sort of strategy circles. And this would be a suggestion to them to think about how to solve that problem.
so many questions.
I was waiting for Dan to unload. Go ahead, Dan.
Do you want to jump in? Sorry, Kerry. I didn't mean to
no,
think
I don't. I just know that you've been champing at the bit. So go ahead and hit it.
Yeah. What I think one of the things that kind of, this has actually happened like 3 or 4 times in a row now, where I've seen like, the social media post or something come up for one of your studies or one of your pieces. And it's like something along the lines of of data that we've got, or like, so it seems like it's going to be, parallel in some way or a similar argument. And then you have some completely different data set that I've never seen. That's like, and it's like a whole different like take on the problem. And it's like, ends up sort of similar to where we're at, with the research we've done. I mean, we have done our whole research project. I love tootling our own horn about this is, we have de-emphasized a lot of the quantitative stuff. We could have gone that way. My background's in electrical engineering. I could have like quanted out hard, but based on my experiences working in politics, I feel like there's genuine magic in like talking to voters and like getting the sort of like harder to deal with qualitative data. And so that has taken us down this road of like doing a lot of like ethnographies, a lot of qualitative. One of the first projects that I did with Way to Win was in 2020. God, this was like a side project. I don't think I was even working with Way to Win on it, but we did longitudinal one-on-one interviews with voters in the October of the Biden 2020 election when Biden won. And it was like one-on-one interviews are like a whole different thing even than a focus group, because like the stuff that people will tell you when it's just a really empathetic, we worked with this amazing researcher, Gretchen Barton, a really empathetic researcher, and them, it's like therapy, right? Like, in fact, we were like, people need to pay us, like it was amazing. But seeing the parallels between a really solid quant approach and then the stuff that we're doing is like one of the things that's really been a lot of fun and is like a theme for this. I feel like on this piece specifically, I guess like when it first came up, I was like, and I think there's a lot more nuance to it. I was like, my first initial thought was like, oh, I don't know if ideology and strength need to be like next to each other. Like moderate and strong might kind of be possible, So I guess that was sort of that was one question that I had, and I'll wait on this.
I mean, they're not opposing, right? In fact, in the survey data, they're correlated. But this is because of partisanship. If you think that the Democratic Party is extreme, you're more likely to be a Republican. You're also just likely to give it negative attributes on all of the questions, because you're polarized against it. But the best thing to be is positive on all of the attributes. So effective, competent, yes, non-extreme or moderate.
Tough would be great.
Not extreme, tough, and weak. Okay, and the other things we asked about. Right now, the survey data says voters describe the Democratic Party as less extreme than the Republican Party, and voters describe the Democratic Party as comatose. So what do? You've already fixed the moderate thing. What's the other thing that you want to fix in this scenario? It's the weak thing.
Yeah, and just to build on that, the swing voters here, by more than 20 points, the swing voters view Republicans as extreme. So, it's like
60%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and this is one of the things that I sort of distracted myself, I think, with all that talk about qualitative. We do a lot of these ethnographies where it's like we use a web panel and we can ask people anything and we ask them all kinds of random questions and it's super fun. One of those things that we do is a metaphor elicitation where we're like, tell us a story about the Democratic Party or show us an image that represents it. When we do that, I meant to pull up a couple of these slides. Maybe I'll put them in the notes or something. We get a lot of like for the Democratic Party, we get a lot of like people holding hands or like climbing mountains. It's like generally a lot of positive stuff. Then we get all these like baby animals, right? We get like turtles and like snails and like like baby bunnies, and like all this like every weak thing that you can sort of imagine. And I think that's I mean, how much of that is self-inflicted from Democrats constantly sort of, I'm describing it based on the drill tweet, like turn the moderation dial and like constantly looking back at the audience for applause, right?
Right.
And how much of that is Republican control of the information environment? I don't know, like it's I think it's a bunch of different things.
Right. But the important thing is that you ask the question from an empirical point of view and try to triangulate an answer that's not, the one that like your billionaire donors gave you, for example, or just that you acknowledge uncertainty and multiple variables at play at all. This is the thing that really gets me going, is there's this assumption that the only thing operating, or the only thing you can control, is whether or not a candidate says they wanted to fund the police or abolish ICE. But that's simply not true to anyone who has run a campaign or thought about politics or done a poll for a single second.
Yeah. And the trade-offs are real. And that, like, if the instant there's a critique comes out about funding the police or whatever, and your instant instinct is to be like, I'm funding the police. This was a discussion that I had literally with one of the big donor advisors, Dimitri Melhorn. His suggestion for Biden's, one of his State of the Unions was we are going to fund the police, right? Like, that was the like line that he wanted in there. And I could just feel like I could feel the demobilization happening, like, when he said this, right? And like, not that like defund the police was the like right way to do it, but like the possible narrative and argument space is just so much bigger than people think. And this idea that like, like it wasn't even the I forget which piece it was. Oh, it was the anti-system one, which we're not really going to get. We decided, Kerry and I decided that was one we couldn't quite get into, but it's another one where
you'll be here for a while with me if you get into that.
Right, totally, right. We can get back to it, right? But that, like, this idea that like you can line all the voters up, and then it's just how big of a box do you can just move people off. Like, no, like, just talk to voters. Like, the trade-offs are real, and like it's just not a simple linear thing. Like, that was the one where you really sort of went in on median voter theorem, and that was, again, taking quantitative approach, where totally from our sort of practitioner side of like talking to voters and working with groups and working with individuals and knocking on doors and doing relational organizing and the kind of media testing that we do, like, that all so lines up so completely.
The other thing I found really interesting that jumped out at me, because we heard so many people in our qualitative research, in our focus groups say, and we were mostly talking to Democrats, or at least people who had voted for Democrats in the past. They might have been defectors. They may have a lot of them didn't vote. They voted for Biden in 2020 and decided not to vote in 2024. And 31% of Democrats say their own party is weak. And that's almost 3 times the 13% of Republicans who say the same about their own party. And it just leapt off the page at me that this would be so demotivating in terms of voting, even if you think that your party is the more competent party, the more principled party, the more empathic party, all of these things. But if you think they're weak and they're not going to deliver, then it's just not motivating to get out and vote.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we had a bit of this debate last year with the polling on the Democratic favorability numbers. You'll remember this was leading the Wall Street Journal, for example, the lowest ever Democratic favorability rating in their survey, they said. And it turned out to be mostly noise. We have an average going up on 50+1 soon on party favorability ratings, and the Democrats are at like 33 and the Republicans are at 35. Okay, they're not that different. They're certainly not different enough for us to make interpretations about which party is, dead, for example, and the other one is thriving. Okay, that is not suggested or supported by the data. But the reason that the Democrats' favorability rating is so low is not because independents, so low comparatively. Okay, it's not because independents or swing voters are that much more likely to describe the party unfavorably than they are to describe the Republican Party unfavorably. It's because Democratic and left-leaning voters in the surveys, and I know this because we conducted the same analysis and we looked at the subsets here. Those left-leaning groups are the ones that say the party is unfavorable or they don't like the party, and that drags down the aggregate rating. So, yeah, this is a good another example that the aggregate statistics are really not super useful on party favorability and stuff, and the narratives that especially the press tries to write with the survey data is often not even supported by the survey data once you start digging under the hood of that aggregate number.
Right. This data point was also the first slide in Jennifer's talk at our event last year at Persuasion 2025. It was where we started our analysis. But I'm curious, in your analysis, I don't know, like this may be reaching back too far for crosstabs back in the past, but the sense that I got was that it wasn't that the more left group of voters was huge or was super frustrated with the party, but it was like a third-ish, 40%-ish of the party, and it was pretty depressed, right? So I'm trying to remember. Does that sort of line up with your recollection of how big that problem was? Or
yeah, Democrats are slightly more likely than Republicans to describe the party as unfavorable or to say they don't know. But it's not the case that, and this is true on the weak data as well, is not the case that the average Democrat thinks the party is weak or doesn't favor the party. It's that there's a solid 30% or so that describe the party negatively and think it's weak.
Okay.
Right.
That seems right. Yeah.
Dan, do you want to go ahead and head into your area? Because I think
Sure. Sure.
I'm just trying to make sure we got enough time for all of it. So
sure. Yeah. No, and this is, I think, sort of goes to that. Like, I think the piece that you wrote about question wording and, the framing in a poll and how that changes things. I mean, this is something that we have been tracking since the beginning. And I'll cop to this. Like, somebody online, maybe it was you, was talking about how, like, a lot of people who work in polls right now haven't taken a survey methods class. I have not taken a survey methods class.
Oh, Dan, come on, they're so fun.
In my, I should, right? It would be fascinating, right?
Well, you evidently have done, but it's not a put down on you. You evidently done the work on this, so to speak. So,
well, I was gonna say a little bit about my background and sort of defend myself too. But thank you, I appreciate that, because my journey into politics I started out knocking on doors, and it always cracks me up because I feel like, I think, oh God, the value of knocking on doors is like, there's so many layers to it. But, like, I feel like I got a lot of research for free, but like the one I'll never forget was like, it was like a friend of ours was running for city council, and we were in Santa Barbara, and you knock on student stores there, and like, the billowing cloud of pot smoke that came out of the door, like, just like serious, like, thick, like you couldn't see the end of the room, right? Like,
we lost Elliott.
Oh, geez.
I don't think I did it. Did I do it?
His internet just went kablooey, it looks like.
Oh no.
There we go. So yeah, so billowing pot smoke coming out of this place, and like, the way that somebody explained it to me was like, a mentor of mine said, politics is like a TV that's on loud but in another room, right? Like, it's not like the people who listen to this podcast, the people talking on this podcast, we're all like paying a lot of attention to this. Most people just aren't. They're busy. They've got lives. They've got, like, they live in a hyper capitalist society. They're trying to make their ends meet, like, it's like they've got families, they've got stuff they want to do, they got fun stuff they want to do. It's really, that's like the main thing to keep in mind, like, when when you're thinking about all this stuff.
It reminds me of this old Simpsons sketch, which somebody sent me the other day, where whoever the young characters are conducting a focus group, asking people what type of TV show they want. And they're asking them, do you want a realistic, down-to-earth show? People say yes. And say, do you want a show that's completely off the wall and swarming with magic robots? They say yes. So you want a realistic, down-to-earth show that's completely off the wall and swarming with robots? It's a surprisingly good analogy for the media voter.
It's that, if you want to if you don't want to go take survey methods, just go watch the 10 minutes of that, or the 5 minutes of that, or 3 minutes maybe of that episode, and you will understand everything you need to know about understanding social science. Like,
contradictions are really are really deep in American political psychology.
Yeah. So that, and like, another, like, part of this that I feel like has, through my process of like, and like where I was sort of going with all this was like, we try to work with really, really good professionals, right? I know this is not, it's not something that I have a deep background in. So we've worked with amazing firms, people like Selena Lake, people like Impact Polling, where we're doing one right now with Luke Martin and Molly Murphy. They're amazing. Like all these brilliant people. That's how we've sort of gotten around this. But it's still really easy to fall into these traps. And I guess this is sort of what the question I had for you was like, how do you approach this? And like, are you writing your surveys mostly yourself, or like, what is your sort of team? And this, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on this, but like, in the sense of like what voters need to know, like, what is your process like? Because like, it's something that we've evolved for a long time too, and I'm just curious, like, sort of how you think about it.
Yeah, so I work with a group of pollsters to vet question wording. Like someone else does my field work for me. Someone else programs the survey questions for me. I get feedback from those people on the question wording and such. I think there's some other smart approaches. Well, this is basically a recreation of how this works in every media, or in most media polling operations these days. And actually, in some cases, the people in charge of these polls are so busy that the questions come from the pollsters, or just from the backlog of questions that partnership has asked previously. So, yeah, I intentionally work with a partner instead of doing all this stuff myself, because I view it as a safeguard against bad question wording, or suboptimal, let's say, and suboptimal methods. They also handle the weighting and design of the surveys. So that's how I do it. I also like the way the argument does their survey, where they have partners collaborate on the question wording, academic partners and practitioners sign off on the question wording. The presentation of the data is one thing, and something I disagree with sometimes, but you can't argue with the way that they've conducted that survey. I think it's a good model for the future of polling in the media, which will be largely independent, because the future of media is largely independent as well.
Right. Do you, I mean, that's like, I agree. And it seems that they have a panel of 4 or 5 people, I think, that they're running their questions past. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't name all of them, but I know a couple of them are academics. There's 5 or so involved, and I believe it rotates as well. They invite some experts on depending on the context of the survey, so that's good. And when you have a lot of time, or that's like one of the only things you're doing, then it's a good thing to do. I am blessed to be in the situation to have a lot of demands on my time these days, and so honestly, the extra back and forth on that I would find of marginal utility, given my survey partners are really good at that already.
Yeah. No, and that's sorry, just really quickly. That's one of the things that we found too, is like, it's one of the areas, like with ad scripts, where we feel like there's this like irritatingly linear curve between effort and quality, right? Like, where if we sit there and really tear apart a question and spend 6, 7, we're on draft 7 of an instrument right now, right? Or something, like, we actually get better results, and it's like, it's horrifyingly time consuming, but like,
it's worth it. It's worth to do the really hard work. Now, the other thing is that the monthly question, the monthly survey I run typically includes about 75% of the same questions, because it's intended to be a tracking survey. So you can also minimize your time that way, spending the extra time that you would spend on all the questions on those couple that are really pressing for the news, in my case, or speaking to something about voter psychology that is worth unearthing for the masses. That's kind of how I operate.
I love a tracking survey. I did just want to bring in one example from this piece, because you were talking about how wording choices in this piece can swing public opinion based on what you're asking, the wording you're using, up to 60 points. And you talked about both immigration and trans rights. But one of the examples was, if you ask about amnesty, it splits respondents almost exactly down the middle, with 47% of U.S. adults opposed to amnesty and 45% in favor. But if you ask about a path to citizenship, it produces a landslide, with 76% in favor compared to 18% opposed. That's a net 58% essentially plus Democratic, assuming that Democrats are actually talking about a pathway to citizenship. If they cede the conversation, then they're on the losing end of that. But please feel free to elaborate on that insight.
Yeah, I did get some pushback. You could argue that amnesty as a policy is not the same as pathway to citizenship. Actually, if you look at the law that has been proposed for amnesty, it is essentially a pathway to citizenship. There are restrictions on who would qualify for that amnesty, and one of them is living here a long time. The other one is not being a criminal, which is essentially what people are arguing for in the pathway to citizenship anyway. But the point is that people respond to the different cues about that policy, or about the same policy, very differently because of the word amnesty. And again, this isn't new, but I do think is an important contribution to the debates that we're having about party strategy, because it speaks a lot to some findings that certain pollsters are getting on certain issues, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So this is one of the big questions that I had for you on this topic specifically. Is you're right, it's not new, and even little me, who's just had been lucky to work with really smart people in this department, understands framing and question wording effects and all these things. And maybe it's because I knocked on a lot of doors originally and I realized that this is how people understand things. I don't know. Why is there so much sort of institutional resistance to this understanding? And I love that you've talked about humility in a couple of your posts recently, and that's been a huge catchphrase for us too. And there was a great talk by actually another partner that we work with, James Slezak from Swayable, who's almost his whole talk was about the humility and what we need to take from these things. Why is that not happening in DC? Why? I feel like it's a common thread, and I'm curious what your perspective is on that.
I mean, the thing you have to understand about Washington DC insiders is there's absolutely no premium for talking about uncertainty. There's a negative return on the amount you can charge your consulting clients if you spend time acknowledging uncertainty. There's
it's like my worst fear.
There's no reward for me to be on this podcast talking about, except for credibility with you fine folks, but certainly a client is not going to hear this and say, this guy's going to tell us when what we're spending $500,000 on is totally inefficacious. But let's sharpen that a little bit. The actual problem is with the press, not with the campaign consultants, and there it's an audience thing. You're not gonna be able to sell ad dollars on television talking about caveats and uncertainty in surveys, right? Or else ABC News would still be operating 538, for example. And to the extent that you are able to do those things, it's in an outlet like Strength in Numbers, which is essentially monetizing nerdery about polls for people who care about that directly, and making an explicit trade-off that it's not going to be as accessible to the masses, or to people in the power centers. So I think that answers your question. There's just not the people who are writing the things that you are reading are not incentivized to talk about uncertainty or to really deal with the task at hand with any humility at all.
As a journalist, I will say, I was a journalist who was decent at writing and good at relating to people, and not necessarily when I started that knowledgeable about numbers, data, polling, etc. I could write my way through some data, but not have any sophisticated understanding of what made a good poll versus a bad poll. So there's a little bit of ignorance involved too.
Can I ask a question?
I'm not trying to I'm just saying that sometimes these reporters are reporting what they see on the page because that's the best they're capable of. You know what I mean?
Kerry, I have a question for you. We're just talking now. How did you, in your skill set as a journalist, when you were doing that the most, did you consider yourself to have a strongly tuned like bullshit meter? Like, did you?
In talking to people.
Okay, right, because that's what I'm wondering. Because you said you had good social skills, so you could kind of tell.
That's
Because
funny.
I think this kind of goes with the incentives problem that Elliott was talking about. It's pretty easy to bullshit with numbers if you're confident and if you're, and if the like conclusions align with like what the people want anyway, right?
Yeah,
like
that's the real
like
kicker. Yeah.
like David Shore is always pitched as being the guy who's telling Democrats what you don't want to hear. Dude, that guy is telling Democrats exactly what they want to hear, right? You don't have to talk about any of these uncomfortable social issues. Great.
To be fair to him, I think that's more the editorialization of his work, but
maybe.
yeah,
Okay.
certainly
But
those people
right.
are
Sure.
selling
Right.
selling certain views.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing to take away from this piece is that it's so variable, right? That if you're deciding exactly what you're going to say based on any one poll or maybe any, set of polls done by certain people, then you're not leaving room for the fact that you get to make an actual argument, right? It's like, well, if this certain opinion, it tests better than something else, what if I actually made the case 10 points better? What if I actually spent time making the case for that thing? In this case, it suggests that Democrats left path to citizens because we did not hear Democrats, for the most part, in 2024 make a full-throated argument about immigration and a pathway to citizenship. In this case,
not a nickel.
Right.
I can confirm that looking at all the ads. So.
Right. In this case, even though pathway to citizenship polls better on its face, right? They did not make a case for that, and instead decided to talk just about the southern border. In a lot of cases, reinforce. Dan always talks about this, and it's true. Reinforce what Republicans were talking about with like, oh, we need to be strong on the border and whatever. And they just left pathway to citizenship for dead. Right. And this is, I think, a case for you can't be fully motivated just by some quantitative research, because number one, if you don't make the case, it doesn't matter. And number two, you might be able to make the case and shift public opinion on it too. There is an actual persuasion element, but
yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, the way that I've been describing this in some interviews is that there's this, there's belief in DC among the people we're talking about, that we know we're talking about, that public opinion is just this organic thing that just is. Climate. Okay. And that it is not influenced, but only influences. And that is, again, if you spend any time with campaigns or studying public opinion, you know that there are very notable shocks in public opinion and people responding to events. And there's also like generational changes, people moving in and out of the electorate, or same-sex marriage is a great example of just like a slow chipping away at old, out-of-date attitudes, depending on your persuasion. And persuasion, to get it. And that is what, that is what you can build a political movement on. And also, by the way, like if you are just seen as the reactive party, you are also not seen as the tough, non-weak party that voters are saying they want their parties to be.
Yeah, there's a trade-off. This actually is getting at, and Kerry, your question kind of got at this too. That was another one of the big questions that I had for you. And like, I hate this word sort of in this tactic, but steel manning an argument. Let's just say I'm going to raise an argument that they're going to raise, which is that, you mentioned malapportionment at the beginning, right? One of, I think, the sort of meta arguments against being more strong, taking our own side, this kind of thing, is that we have to win in these, states that are more conservative than other places. And I'm curious how you think, like, if you look at this sort of macro argument that you made in the strength versus moderation piece, I wonder what your sense of how that breaks down in like at the sort of like in the geographies where it needs to where we do need to win, like I think that's it's an argument that they, the sort of DC establishment types have raised repeatedly, that like, I think it's a good question. My sense is, yes, we do need to talk to Republicans. You don't necessarily persuade them by sounding more Republican, right? But that's, I'm just curious what you think. And
I mean, that's the great case study exists as the Labor Party over the last year, which has moved dramatically to the right on immigration, and also has had some pretty strategic blunders on, I guess let's just call it elitism, right? And that has ended up rewarding them with the lowest position in the polls since the party was founded.
Are they lower now than like the Dems even? Like, are they? I don't know if
well, yeah, it's a multi-party system.
But,
yeah. I think you're talking about over in England, right?
Correct.
For just a second, I wondered if you were talking about the Labor Party in Minnesota, the Democratic Labor Party.
Oh, no,
sorry.
No, the UK Labor Party.
Yeah.
And that is, there's plenty of research that says appeasement of right-wing parties affects the other parties negatively by ceding all rhetorical ground on that issue and making parties look weak. So if you are a capital L liberal party of the liberal tradition, which the Democrats and the Republicans are to some extent in America, but in the UK and most European parties, or used to be, sure,
for the Republican,
for the record, the left is. Let's just say the left is. Then in terms especially of like societal openness and social rights and stuff, the worst possible thing you could do is legitimize the illiberal critique of that ideology. So the translation of that here to America is the worst possible thing Democrats could do on immigration is cede or deportations in particular, is cede their case against deportations. That also means they need to have a informed, coherent counter to the right's immigration and deportation agenda, which I don't know. Are they making that? So there's some work that they can do there, for sure. But the most important thing is that they don't adopt the Republican frame.
Sure. Right.
I honestly wondered if you could. I heard Simon Rosenberg talk about the mass deportation agenda, and I honestly wondered if it was an opportunity for Democrats to attach a bunch of things that went very wrong during Trump's mass deportation agenda to that. So, like, prices went up, right? Families torn apart, people feel less safe. Blah, blah, blah. So it's a failure of the mass deportation agenda, but it's not just about deportation. It's about a number of the things that followed in its wake. Anyway, that's untested. It was just a thought, but yeah. Okay. Dan?
I think they should. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
I agree. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Worth a try.
Worth a try. Maybe we should head into Texas.
Yeah.
Let's just head into Texas real quick as a wind up to this, because obviously everybody's talking Texas, and for anybody who is listening to this and hasn't gone back, we pounded out a brief short take on Texas with Tori Gavito and Joe Hamill of Way to Win on Wednesday morning, so you can go back and look at that. But this morning, we're recording this on Wednesday as well, Elliott posted a piece about why this could be the year that Democrats might actually flip Texas, and as opposed to other years in the past. Not maybe it's not the great white whale. I don't know. Elliott, do you want to just tell us a few of your observations about that and whether they've changed since you posted?
Well, I never changed my mind ever. That's a joke for listeners.
No, this is the key. This is how you're going to get listened to in DC, right? You have now aligned with the incentives of DC.
Right. There you go. So, but my mind let's just start with the table stakes, I guess. I do think Democrats have a better shot at Texas than they have in recent memory, for a couple of data-driven reasons I lay out in my article at Strength in Numbers. The biggest one being the Ken Paxton wild card. I'm a Texan, so I feel like I'm allowed to criticize him. Is a just horrible person. He cheats on his wife. He cheats the state out of money. He has been impeached for this and is being divorced for the former currently. And taking off my Democratic Texan hat now and putting back on the strategist hat, this shows up in the polls. In the horse race matchups between James Talrico and Paxton, Talrico does about 2.6 to be exact, or 3 points better than John Cornyn does in those matchups against Talrico among the same pollsters. So if, and there's a big if, Republicans go for Paxton, then that's 2 or 3 points, roughly speaking, and we're ahead of time and there's uncertainty, but some extra points you can assign to the Democratic aisle. Now, I said 2.6. Do you happen to remember Beto O'Rourke's margin in the 2018 Senate race in Texas? 2.6. Exactly.
2.6. I was going to say it's exactly
2.6. So,
Story would have known.
Talrico's not
Right.
Beto O'Rourke. I actually think to his advantage. The other big notable thing about the Talrico campaign is the emphasis on the billionaires and what he calls the wrong 1%, or that we're focusing on the wrong 1%, and this is the villainous one. And that is something that resonates with Americans on the Democratic and the independent side, and potentially on the Republican side. This is something that I've called the sort of anti-system axis in politics. If you go and you look at the county level results from last night, and this is not something I included in my piece, and I would have if we had final county level results when I wrote it. Talrico does much better, about 31 points better than Crockett, in the counties that voted for Bernie Sanders in the 2016 Democratic primary in the state, and Clinton in the Clinton counties. I think Crockett does about 12 or 13 points better. So it's we're like correlating some things here, but if our theory is that he's doing better for the similar reasons Bernie Sanders is doing or did in this anti-system, anti-elite, anti-inequality thing, then that gives him an extra shot in a state that is more red than blue, and where you need to appeal to those voters in some new non-left versus right way, and the anti-system way is a good way in.
I like it.
So I would give him about a 50% chance if Paxton wins. I think that's where I'd be.
Yeah. Quick shout out to Chuck Rocha, friend of the pod, who it was the architect of Bernie's Southwest strategy, and when he went after Latinos, and was super successful. Bernie, little known fact, Bernie was hugely popular with Southwest Latinos. I don't know if maybe everybody knows that, but but that was a real statistical anomaly in some of Bernie's results. And Chuck was also working with Talrico on this, even in the primary, and did a lot of work that I think was moving pieces around in a similar way. The question that I had about that. There goes my train of thought.
I do have a quick question. It is an off-the-wall question that may not be answerable, but may be misguided. I'll ask it anyways.
Yeah.
Which is, the conventional wisdom, of course, and proven, of course, also backed up by your data, is that, we're better off with, that Republicans are better off with Cornyn winning and Democrats are better off with Paxton winning. Is there any world in which, because Paxton is the true MAGA candidate. Now, Cornyn is a rubber stamp for Trump, so it's not like he's not MAGA, but like Paxton is Paxton is the true firebrand, right? Is there any world in which Cornyn wins, but because Trump's appeal is not translatable, he doesn't draw out as many people as Paxton might, if he were the person? Even though,
sure, yeah,
I don't know, it's just a thought.
Yeah, it's compelling. It's compelling to me that and we're like operating in this world of hypotheticals and counterfactuals and etc. But if you were to take the for example, like Dan Patrick firebrand energy out of the state's lieutenant governor's races and replace that with a more centrist, calm dude. I don't know if that would play as well among the far right in Texas, for example. But yeah, these differences I think would probably be at the margin. But it's going to be a marginal. It could be a marginal election, so that could matter. The thing that looks likely to happen, and this is just some news today while we're recording, the Atlantic is reporting that Trump's going to endorse Cornyn because he views him as a safer electoral bet, which is just like, what? Why did we spend all this money? He could have done that a week ago.
He could have just anointed him,
and he could have won.
Totally.
He was only 8 points off. Yeah, he could have anointed anyway. But I mean, I'm sure the media ad buyers and the consultants are really happy either with having two statewide elections in Texas for one Republican nomination. So.
I wonder if at this point Paxton looks at this and he sees Trump in a weakened state, and I mean, his approval is what, 45 or whatever in Texas now, right? So like,
among registered voters,
he says he goes the MTG route and says, yeah, that's true. Actually, that's RVs, right? So that's not going to be like inside the Republican Party. He's probably still in the 80s, right? So there may not be a path there, but he may be like, forget Trump. Like I'm America first, not MAGA, and try to run anyway. I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably doesn't
there's no path in the Republican primary that doesn't run through Donald Trump's endorsement.
I did pull up one piece of data that I was curious about. That there was a poll 2 weeks ago about, or maybe a week ago, about the Texas electorate, and we're sort of wading into ideology territory here, but I'm going to put this up. They
screen share, nice, okay,
yeah. I think this.
I didn't know we could do that. I would have been doing that this whole time.
Oh, my bad.
This part is like, I've never asked a question like this, and like caveats. We talked about the limitations of ideology before and how voters self-perception of that. It's particularly putting it on a 0 to 10 scale. It's like you're going to get really weird effects, right? But this is so fascinating. And for people who are listening, it's a chart. It was Chisholm Strategies, I think was the name of it. Blueprint was the firm, not the Blueprint in DC. There's another firm called Blueprint. Sorry, this is bowling. But it has a blue block, and basically, just to describe this like sort of visual or audibly, what the visual is. Most Democrats think of themselves as like being right smack in the middle, as being super like lined up against the moderate. That's the modal response in there. And most Republicans like are trying to break the scale and move it off to the right as far as they can. And like this, in terms of a picture, like I don't know what this would look like nationally. This is the Texas electorate. Most Republicans in Texas are going to say, I am as conservative as you can possibly get, which I just think is fascinating. But I'm curious what you think, Elliott.
Yeah, I mean, the polarization here looks to be about like 2 or 3 times as bad. Like just looking at the number of people at 10 most Republican or most conservative versus people at 1. Right. Yeah, I mean, what's this like? Yeah, we don't really know. This is ideological self-placement, which is a pretty good proxy for voting. I mean, there's a lot of questions for the people watching that you might be able to raise from this, which is, first off, where do people put Crockett versus Tallarico? Where do
that
they put?
Data is in there. We'll put this in the notes.
Okay.
I don't have it. Okay. I don't have it.
Yeah, that would be
they asked
for the
that
people
too.
for the people asking later. Like I would wonder where the independents especially are on this chart as well in terms of a triangulation. But as we've discussed, there's lots of limits to that triangulation, which is why this ideological self-placement data in general is, I think, of pretty limited utility to me.
Yeah.
But interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, the notable thing is, right, we're always assuming that opinions, not we, people in our line of work are constantly assuming that opinions are what we call in political science single peaked. There's a one Gaussian normal distribution, and the mass of people are right there in the middle at 5 out of 10. Right? That's what you get under median voter theorem. And in fact, this is showing opinion is double peaked. One skewed all the way to the right, and one and not normally distributed either, which really complicates the math of any sort of triangulation. I mean, if you go from 4 to 5 and you're the liberal candidate, you are gaining more voters. But if you go to 5 to 6, you are marginalizing a lot more people in the 1 to 2 range than you're gaining going from 5 to 6. So, just from first approximations here, like I don't know what to conclude. Yeah.
Whoever is listening to this, I pity you. But you can go look us up on YouTube and
Go
follow
look
us
at
there
YouTube.
too.
We'll stick in the notes.
It's
right?
really, I was trying to think of an easy way to, it kind of looks like the right part of this, the right-leaning Republican part of this looks like someone
Double
is,
peaks.
well, it looks like they're like giving a big middle finger to something off to the side.
Right.
And I don't know. And then there's a little bit of a peak and that's like the most extreme peak. And then for the Democrats, I believe it's the Democrats. I can't even see it very well, but for the Democrats, it's a little bit more like a high rise right in the middle of the picture.
Just bottom line, apart from the visual, Democrats think of themselves, the modal response, the most frequent response of the Democrats is that they consider themselves moderate. The most frequent response of conservatives is they think of themselves as conservative as you can possibly get on the thing.
Yep.
And this is in Texas. This is specific to Texas.
We will get this data nationally at some point. Elliott or I can pledge at the end to do this in one of our polls. Like, we'll find out.
All right. I tell you what, I do think we should leave it there. Elliott has been very generous with his time. So I want to thank you, Elliott and Dan, for getting into the weeds with some pretty nerdy but very important developments, insights. And whatever you do after listening to this, dash right over to Strength in Numbers, subscribe, support, right? This is the independent data analysis we need to get a real feel for what's happening with the electorate instead of the tired old sort of move left, move right, never admit failure or uncertainty dialogue.
Actual humility.
Actual
$70 a year.
humility.
You can personally change the incentives of DC towards humility by subscribing to Strength in Numbers.
That's right. That's a good pitch.
Kerry, can we do, Elliott, there's a thing that we do at the end.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, sorry.
There's a thing that we do at the end sometimes. 3 media things. It can be music, books, albums, plays you've seen, TV shows, anything.
Anything that you
books we do.
Anything that you dive into that is like your happy place, maybe outside.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, work. 1 or 2.
Does that really exist?
Hey, it could be the last 3 nonfiction, or the last 3 academic papers that you read that blew your mind.
There's too many academic papers. Recently, I've been reading the Star Wars Thrawn trilogy, the second one, Thrawn Ascendancy. Very good for Star Wars fans out there, and so much better than the video Star Wars content being put out recently.
Wow, that's great.
So I would recommend that for the sickos, for the total sickos out there. And then let me think. The last, this is my to read shelf here behind me. I guess I will say
what's the fiction to nonfiction ratio there?
Oh, it's like 80% nonfiction typically. Yeah. I have also been, I'm from a personal level trying to make a company work by myself, which requires lots of boundaries with people and like pretty hard scheduling. So I have time to really think about strategy and direction, and also just like deep thoughts about writing. So a good book is Cal Newport's book, The Computer Scientist and Productivity Guy, Slow Productivity, which I particularly enjoy, and is my excuse when I tell people to F off on email. That's Cal's problem. Yeah, that's Cal's fault.
There you go.
So there's 2.
All right.
I don't think I can do 3.
We love it.
No TV,
2 is good.
No TV, no music.
Oh, I listen only to the same music. TV, somewhat embarrassingly, have been rewatching Modern Family recently, which is just good.
Nothing wrong with it.
Right on.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
Good comfort show. Right.
That's right. Yeah. Every once in a while, TV is just comfort food for me. So it's like
usually it's The Office, but I rotate my streaming subscriptions, and I don't have Peacock right now. So
there you go.
Disney it is.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to our listeners. Please do subscribe to Strength in Numbers. Really support that. And I want to thank our listeners. And while you're following Elliott, subscribe to our feed and on your platform of choice. Tell a friend. Let's keep up the momentum as we train our eyes on November. And with that, until next week, do good, be well, hug your loved ones, and tell your dog I say hi.